In this lesson, we're going to take a look at bar graphs and their close cousin histograms. Okay? Remember, IB calls bar graphs column graphs, but same idea. Okay? Column graphs and histograms are both vertical types of bar graphs. Okay? We use column graphs or bar graphs for categorical and discrete data. So our bars are separate things. Whereas a histogram is used for continuous data. The bars actually touch each other. If you take a look at the two pictures, they look very similar to each other. The only difference is that these bars are touching each other in the one on the right. And we would call this one a histogram. And whereas the other one would be called our column graph. Okay. They both have frequency on the left column. They both have intervals across the bottom. The only real difference is they have gaps. Okay. So when we're asked to talk about histograms or make histograms, we must be dealing with continuous data. Okay. There are times where we can make a histogram for discrete data. We do that when we have a whole lot of intervals and we have to start combining them together. If that case happens, it sometimes makes more sense to make a histogram. Okay. This first example here, we want to take a look at which one you would use. Would it be more appropriate to create a bar graph or a histogram? Remember, the idea is histograms go with continuous data. Okay, so if I'm looking at the height of the building, something I'm measuring, meters, feet, centimeters, if I measure it, it means it's continuous data. That means it's a histogram. Okay, the number of rooms in a building, well, I'd be counting those on my fingers, which makes it discrete data. Tells me I'm using a column graph. Number of people on each floor, again, we're counting. So that would be a column graph. The gender of the people, that's categorical. We use column graphs for categories too. They're separate from each other, they don't overlap. And the sum of the areas in each floor in meters squared, again, we're measuring. So that would be a histogram. Okay, just so we can tell which one to use and when to use it. Okay, to create a histogram. Okay, to make our life easier, we're going to be using some continuous data. We're just going to round it to make the numbers nicer to work with. But really, a histogram is for continuous things that have intervals and have big, long decimals after them lots of times. Okay, don't stress about that. Just if it's something you'd be measuring, we'll make a histogram. Okay, to start with a histogram, we got to start with a frequency table. So we got to make that tally chart. Now, sometimes we'll have it. Sometimes we'll need to build it, but that's where our starting point is, the information in that tally chart. Once we've created it, we kind of need to decide what a histogram is going to look like. So there's a few rules that we have to have. Rule number one, you never have more than 15 intervals. You have to have at least 5. So between 5 and 15. Now, how big those intervals are is sort of up to you. They could be intervals of 10, 20, 100, but we want it between 5 and 15. That way we can look for some patterns, maybe the modal class or maybe outliers or things like that. And there should be no gaps between intervals. So 10 to 19, then 20 to 29. Well, the next one after it says 40 to 49. There's a problem there, right? What happened between 30 and 39? I need to figure that out. I can't skip it even though there's no data in it. I need to show that interval. Okay, intervals cannot overlap. So 20 to 30 and 30 to 40 is a problem because where would the number 30 fall? Which interval? So we generally use inequalities. So 20 to 30, including 20, but not including 30. That's what this means, right? It does not include, does not equal. But it does include the 20 because there's an equal sign there. Okay. Or if we define our data property, we can go 20 to 29, 30 to 39. So we know, okay, at 29.4, what happened there? Was it rounded down? Was it rounded up? Well, it's been defined for us in the words. Okay. And last but not least, each interval has to be the same size. So that means each bar has to be the same size. Okay. You don't have a choice on the size of your bar. It's just how many of them you want. Okay, let's take a look at the first one. Average temperature in degrees Celsius in the month of July in Tokyo. Okay, you can create a frequency table using classes, 25 to 29, and so on and so on. So classes are a fancy way of saying intervals. Okay, we're starting from 25 to 29. Then we can go 30 to 34, and then 35 to 39, 40 to 44. Hey, we gotta find our highest piece of data so know where to stop. So I'm looking. I see a 46. Do I see anything higher than 46? I don't think so. So my intervals, I need one more. So 45 to 49. Remember, we said our rule was at least 5, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm okay. My frequencies, Okay, I can use a tally chart, that's fine if you want to. I'm just going to jump right to the frequencies, go through and count the number of things I have in each interval. But if you want to make tallies first, that works too. Okay, so if I go through and count, how many things do I have between 25 and 29? Find all those pieces of data. Turns out that I have 11. Between 30 and 34, including both 30 and 34, I have 17. 35 to 39 is one of them. I don't think I have anything between 40 and 44. I've got one between 45 and 49. Okay, so there's my tally chart. Part B, I want to sketch the histogram. So remember, a histogram is just a fancy way of saying we're making a column graph. Just make sure that our bars are touching each other. So if I'm making this chart over here, put that there, make our y-axis over here. Oops. Move it to the side for a second. Okay, we need some intervals and we need some frequencies. So I need to pick a scale. So I'll do the vertical one first here. Okay, so I'm going to go by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So I'm going to do that. That'll work. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 14, 16, 18. And this is my frequency. And your vertical one should always be your frequencies. Okay, across the bottom, okay, I need to make at least 5 intervals here. So I'll say 1, oops, that's off by a little bit there. Move it over just a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this was my temperature. And my temperature was measured in degrees Celsius. Okay, what are my intervals going to be? Well, the nice thing about histograms is my lowest bar is the lowest number from our interval. Okay, the next bar, 29 and 30, it's where they meet. So we usually use the second value from your interval. And then so on and so on. So 35 and 40 and 45 and 50. Even though 50 is not part of my table, it would be the next number in the table, okay, which means that I can include 49.99999. My bar would end at 50. Okay, so we use our endpoints of our intervals because these things touch each other. They're histograms to label our intervals across the bottom. Okay, so we need to sketch this. So what do we got? 11 for the first one. So 11 is right there. I'll make this nice this time. Use a ruler. So 11 would go right there. Okay, the next one is 17. So 17 would be up to there. The next one after that would be 1. So 1's just half of this interval at the bottom. Okay, and we've got nothing in the next interval, and we've got 1 in our last one. So 1, and then the next piece will also be 1. And we just join the tops of our bars here. And there is our histogram. Okay, ourselves done. Okay, part C. What percent of the days was over 35? Okay, so using our table or our graph, over 35, from the table I can see there's 2 of them. How many things did I have altogether? If I add them up, I got 28, 29, 30. So 2 out of 30 as a percentage would be 6.67%. Okay, what range do most days fall? I can again look at my table, or I can look at my graph. Okay, so for part D, 30 to 34 degrees Celsius. That was the most common, our modal class, if you will. Okay, if you want to, you could also think of this as interval notation, right? That's what that means. It goes up to 35, but not including it. How would you describe the distribution of the data? Okay, so if I were to draw that symmetrical curve, smooth curve over the data, it would look like this, right? Drops down really fast. It's shifted over to the left. Okay, the positive side is kind of missing. The right-hand side is kind of missing. So we call that positively skewed. There's that example done. Now that's not hard to do. There's nothing complicated about that, but it's time consuming, right? So we want to try and use technology in this course to save us a little bit of time. So we're going to use our graphing calculators for this next part. Okay, so when we're using our graphing calculators, first thing you want to do all the time is clear the memory. Okay, so I pull up the graphing calculator, same one you guys have, and we turn it on. To clear our memory, we're going to use second plus 712. Okay, second plus 712. That clears the memory. Okay, we'll come back to the calculator in a second. Before we start using it, we have to read over the question and see what it wants us to do. Okay, the following represents the decibel level of music that a sample of students prefers. So we're measuring how loud the music is. We want to choose some suitable class intervals to group the data. So we got to pick our intervals. That's the first step here. We're going to do this by hand. There's nothing we can do to simplify that. Okay, so the two things we need to know are what's the lowest piece of data, what's the highest piece of data. So if we scan through, I'm looking for the lowest and the highest. And I see 115 is a high one and 36 is a low one. So my intervals have to include both of those values and go by some sort of interval. So for example, maybe I want to start at 35. Okay. I'm going to use my interval notation this time. I can go up by, I don't know, I can go up by tens, I suppose. But if I went up by tens, I need to go to 45 to 55 to 65 to 75 to 85 to 95 to 105 to 115 to 125. That's 9 intervals. Maybe that's too many. I don't want that many. So maybe I'll go by 15s. Oops. So I can go up by 15. So the next number will be 50. Okay, what's the next one? 50 up to 65. 65 up to 80. 80 to 95. 95 to 110. And the last one, because my biggest piece of data is 115, goes up to 125. Okay, so I've got some intervals. Now I want to use my technology. And my technology is going to help me figure out these frequencies. I don't want to have to go through, make a tally chart. My technology can help me. Here's how we're going to do that. Okay, we're going to go into stat. And here, actually, I'll turn the pages so you can see the instructions here. Okay, so if I want to enter data, this part up here on the left-hand side here, okay, I go to stat. So that's right here in the middle, stat. I want to go into edit, so I press number 1 or I press enter. And then I enter my data into L1. L1 stands for list 1. So for our question, I'm going to type all those numbers that you see at the top there into this list. Okay, and the way that's going to look, move it down just a little bit so we can see our numbers here. I'm going to start typing 110, 79. You can press enter after each one. If you screw up, just arrow back up to it, type over top of it, or press clear and it erases it. Not a big deal. We want all the pieces of data in that list of information. And there should be 22 pieces of data, I believe, which tells me my 23rd one is blank, as you can see on the screen here. L123, there's nothing there. It just says equals. There's nothing in there. Okay. Now I'm going to use my calculator to do all the rest of this question for us. Okay, I got the data in. I've got this table I need to fill in, but I want to graph it. So to graph things with the graphing calculator, you have to create a graph. I see up on the top right-hand side here. Move my calculator over a little bit. Okay, we're going to go to second y equals. Second y equals. Okay, we want to go into stat plot. Plot number 1. Now, if you notice, plot 1 says off. If I press enter, I go into it, I want to turn it on. I need to highlight the on part. Okay, for my type, I got to choose the graph I want. I want a bar graph, which is over here to the right. Again, I need to highlight it, so I got to press enter. If I were to press graph right now, I don't actually get anything. The problem is that the graph is set up for graphing, like y equals kind of questions. So the standard window from -10 to +10. Well, that's not the kind of data I have. So I need to adjust that. In other words, I need to adjust my window. To adjust the window, I go to the bottom left over here. I have to use my interval table for this. Okay? The x min is the lowest interval value. So from the question, our lowest interval value was 15. Oh, sorry, was 35. 35? Hang on, let's go back to the question. I didn't see it. Yes, 35. Okay, so I need to go back and type in my calculator, x min 35. My x max is my highest interval value. Okay, so looking at this, it would be 125. Okay, x SCL is my scale, how big each interval is. I'm going up by 15s. My y min, well, my y is my frequency, the lowest number of pieces of data I can have in an interval. That's 0. I can't have negative data. Okay, my y max is the maximum number of things I have in an interval. Now, I don't know that yet. So I'm going to leave it at 10. I'll adjust it as necessary. Now, when I press graph, I get a nice histogram. Okay, it looks perfect. How do I get my data from my table from this? I press the trace button. When I press trace, at the bottom of the screen, it tells me a min of 35 to a max of 50, n equals 1. So between 35 and 50, there's one frequency. Let's look at the next one. Press the over button, the arrow, right-hand arrow. Hey, between 50 and 65, there's 1 again. Press the arrow button. I got 4, 8, 5, and 3. So 4, 8, 5, and 3. And I just use the technology to save me from having to make the table by hand and the graph by hand. So the graph we're done. We constructed it. That's what it means by construct. Okay, you don't have to draw anything this time. Okay, for part C, describe the distribution. So let's take a look at our picture. If I drew a smooth curve over that, it looks like my data is slightly to the right. So I would say there's a slight negative skew to this. Okay, I'm missing the bottom side of it. And then for part D, what is the mold class seen? I can look for the most common bar, or I can look at my table and say, oh, that's 80 to 95 decibels. That's the most common thing that I see. Okay, and there's where you can use a little bit of technology to make our histogram. Right, for the last example here, you can try the same thing again. Use your graphing calculator. See if you can make the appropriate histogram using intervals of 40 to 50 as your starting point. Okay, so if you're using your graphing calculator, you got to clear it again. You can clear the whole memory if you want to. That would work totally fine. Or if you go back to your list, which is under Stat, Edit, if you go up to the top where it says L1 and press Clear, make sure it's clear, not delete, okay? Clear, and press Enter, it clears the entire list. Okay, so if we're making this with our graphing calculator, and you may want to pause this right here just so you can try it yourself. Okay, see if you can remember how. I can put my data in, just the way it looks. You get really good at entering data in this course. Okay, and then we got to adjust our window. So my x min, my lowest interval will be 40. My x max, so 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70, 70 to 80, 80 to 90. I see data past that, so 90 to 100. So 100 is my last interval value. We're going up by tens. We start at 0 and 10. I have to turn it on. Now, because I didn't re-clear the entire memory, it's already on, but turn it on, make sure it's a bar graph, and then press graph. Okay, and there's your histogram. You can use your trace button to find out your values. So 40 to 50, there's 2. 50 to 60 is 5. 7, 3, 0, 3. And it's okay to have zeros. Nothing wrong with zeros. That tells us there's just nothing in that interval. Okay, so you can write down your interval table, or your frequency table, and that takes us through histograms. Okay, a couple of questions you might want to try at the end here. Just number 5 from your duotang. Okay, there's an example there you can try. And if you need the instructions, don't forget that these are also in your green books. You can take a look at them. Okay.